William Lancaster, with the cold resolve of a determined man, walked into the mansion's living room that once served as his home. Emily was there, seated on the couch where they had often shared dreams, plans, and promises. She felt a tightness in her chest, sensing the gravity of the conversation ahead. William approached with a serious, nearly expressionless face. Emily, hiding her anxiety, offered a shy smile, hoping he might say something positive, perhaps a solution to the growing distance between them. But William cut straight to the point. "Emily, it's not working anymore," he declared, each word as cold as if he were discussing a business deal, not their marriage. Emily blinked, taken aback, as if he were speaking a foreign language. "William, what do you mean by that?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, trying to hold herself together as she looked at him. But William stood there, arms crossed with a resolute expression. "I've changed, Emily," he continued, indifferent to the emotion building in her eyes. "I need someone who understands me, someone who matches my life now, and you've stayed the same." Emily felt a sharp pang at his words. Stayed the same? She had dedicated her life to supporting him, sacrificing for his success, and now he saw her as stagnant. She could barely breathe as he continued, each phrase hitting her heart like a hammer. "Don't get me wrong," he said, as though trying to soften the blow, but the words lacked any warmth. "You were always good to me, but I need someone vibrant, someone modern, who understands the demands of my lifestyle." Emily held back tears, struggling to keep her composure. "William, I've been by your side from the beginning. When you needed someone, who was there? It was me. When your business was just starting, I was there, holding your hand. And now you say, I'm outdated." William looked away, as if the conversation was merely a burden to him. "Emily, you need to understand the world changes and I can't stay stuck in the past." Emily stood, her posture defiant despite the pain tearing her apart inside. "I'm the past then. Everything we built together, the sleepless nights, the fights, the victories, you're just throwing it all away as if none of it mattered?" "Emily, please don't be dramatic. There's no point in trying to save something that's already dead," he replied, devoid of empathy, like a spectator to her pain. A wave of anger mingled with her pain. "Dramatic," she repeated, incredulous. "I'm your wife, William. I was there when no one else was. And now you replace me just like that with no consideration." He finally looked at her, but his gaze was hardened. "Look, Emily, I found someone who better fits who I am now, someone who gives me what I need at this stage of my life." Emily stared at him, searching for some remnant of the man she once loved and who had loved her in return. But there was nothing in his eyes but cold indifference. She could almost see the shadow of another woman in them, Tiffany, who he now spoke of openly without even trying to hide. "She's young, beautiful. She gets what it means to live in this world," he explained, indifferent to the shock and pain on her face. "And I need a partner like that." Emily couldn't hold back her tears any longer as they began streaming down her face. "You're a cruel man, William. I was your wife, your partner, and you discard me like an old object with no value." He merely sighed as if he expected her to simply accept his terms. "Emily, we both know we've been living as strangers under the same roof for a long time. I'm just putting an end to it." Emily took a deep breath, gathering what little strength she had left. "So, that's it. After all these years, you really don't see anything in me anymore. But one day, you'll regret this, William. You'll realize what you're losing." William just shrugged, indifferent. "I wish you happiness, Emily. I really do. I hope you find what you need to move forward." And without hesitation, he turned and walked toward the door without looking back. Emily stood alone in the silence of the room, feeling hollow and shattered as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she had built, every moment shared, every sacrifice, now felt like nothing more than dust in the wind. And as William left to begin his new life with Tiffany, Emily felt her heart break, but promised herself that she would find a way to rebuild it. Once he was gone, she let the tears flow freely. Through her sobs, Emily realized that this was the end of something, and perhaps the beginning of something else. She was broken, yes, but a seed of strength was beginning to grow, hidden within the cracks of her overwhelming pain. Meanwhile, William continued with his life without looking back. Regret hadn't touched him yet. He was convinced that moving forward with Tiffany was best. The emptiness he felt was something he couldn't yet understand, absorbed as he was in the euphoria of the new, oblivious to the depth of what he'd left behind. Emily Lancaster left New York, carrying a mixture of sadness and a faint, almost invisible glimmer of hope. In the days following the breakup, the pain of losing the man she loved was so overwhelming that it almost suffocated her. Moving to a small town in Connecticut seemed like her only option. New York was saturated with memories that cut like knives. Every corner reminded her of a shared moment. Every restaurant echoed with laughter and promises they once made together. She knew that if she stayed, she'd never heal from the wounds William left behind. Arriving in Fairfield, Connecticut, Emily felt the curious eyes of the townspeople on her. The town, peaceful and cloaked in a nearly forgotten quiet, was the opposite of everything she knew. Fairfield had tree-lined streets, parks where children played, and a quaint town centre full of cafes, little craft shops, and a bakery that filled the air every morning with the scent of fresh bread. For someone accustomed to the frenzy and anonymity of Manhattan, the change was drastic. Instead of feeling smothered by loneliness in a sea of millions, she now found herself in a place where everyone seemed to know and care about each other's lives. What was left from the divorce settlement allowed Emily to buy a modest house on the outskirts of town, far from anyone who might recognize her name or her story. The house was simple, an old building with white walls and wooden details that made it feel warm. At first she felt lost in that empty space, without the elegant furniture and memories of a shared life. But in time she began to appreciate the serenity of that house. It was the refuge she needed to rebuild her identity. Emily filled her days with simple tasks and small routines. She woke up early, walked to the town center, and spent hours in the local library, a quiet place where she could reflect and read about subjects that had always interested her, but never had time to explore. There she found a peace she had almost forgotten. Sometimes the pain would resurface with intensity, the memories of William still strong, but she was beginning to build something new, something that was entirely hers. One morning, during one of these peaceful routines, she felt strangely nauseous. At first, she attributed it to the stress of the recent changes, but the symptoms persisted. Days went by, and the discomfort didn't disappear. Curious, Emily decided to visit the town's only medical office. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, ran a few simple tests, and when she returned to the room, she looked surprised and emotional. "Emily, you're pregnant," the doctor said, and the words echoed in Emily's mind like an avalanche. Pregnant. The world spun. Sitting in that quiet office, her mind was filled with a whirlwind of emotions: shock, fear, joy, uncertainty. As she listened to the doctor's instructions, something within her began to bloom. She was suddenly carrying new life, perhaps the greatest gift she could imagine. Emily left the office stunned, but as the days passed, her initial shock gave way to a deeper feeling. She would hold her hands over her stomach and speak to her babies in her mind, promising them a life full of love. The thought of telling William about the pregnancy briefly crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. He didn't want her in his life, nor the commitment of a marriage. It wouldn't make sense to bring the children into William's world, where they'd likely be seen as an inconvenience. She decided she wouldn't give him the power to destroy what she was beginning to build. The first months of pregnancy were full of challenges. She felt extreme fatigue, frequent nausea, and, on the hardest days, a deep sadness still took hold of her heart. But rather than giving in to the pain, Emily found strength she never knew she had. Amid the difficulties, hope grew within her, and the love she felt for her children was enough to keep her going. During the long, sleepless nights, she imagined each of her babies' faces, their smiles, their personalities. She visualized a future where her children would be happy, raised with love and values. As her belly grew, Emily began to make friends with the locals. They were kind and welcoming, and over time she realized that despite her past in New York, she could have a new life here. One sunny morning, a neighbor named Clara, a warm and talkative woman, approached her, and noticing Emily's belly, greeted her with maternal enthusiasm. "Oh, I knew you looked different," Clara exclaimed joyfully. "Welcome to the world of motherhood." Clara soon became her friend and confidant, someone with whom Emily shared part of her story, though she omitted the identity of her children's father. Over the following weeks, Clara was a constant source of support for Emily. They walked through the park, talked for hours about motherhood, and on nights when fear of the future tried to take over, Clara reminded her that she was strong enough to go on. Emily began to feel less alone, more grounded, and the idea of raising her children in that simple and welcoming environment seemed perfect. As the months went by, Emily experienced pregnancy intensely. Every kick was a reminder, that she had made the right choice, and when nausea caught her off guard, or when the weight of her belly made movement difficult, she remembered the purpose that now guided her. The presence of her triplets became an anchor that kept her steady, even when memories of William and the pain of the past tried to resurface. Time passed, and Emily's belly grew faster than expected, and the doctor soon gave her the news. She was expecting triplets. The impact of the news was overwhelming. She was in shock once again. 3 children, 3 lives entirely dependent on her. Processing this revelation, she laughed and cried, overcome by a mixture of emotions. A new kind of strength took hold, and she knew she would do anything for her children. The love she felt for them, though she barely knew them, was unconditional, giving her the energy to face whatever might come. And so, Emily moved forward with her head held high, determined to be a strong mother, capable of giving her triplets a safe life full of love. Every night, before bed, she spoke to them, promising a life full of adventures and joy. And on the hardest days, she smiled, remembering that these babies were her personal miracle, her chance to start anew. Emily transformed from a woman devastated by abandonment into a devoted mother full of hope. With the arrival of her children, she found a new reason to live. Without depending on anyone, and with the love that grew daily for her children, Emily built a solid new foundation, where the past no longer weighed as heavily, and the future was full of possibilities. The day the triplets were born was marked by an overwhelming mix of emotions for Emily. After months of preparation and anticipation, she felt that she was finally going to see the faces of those who had become the center of her life. On a cloudy morning, she was taken to the hospital by Clara, her loyal friend, who had been there since Emily arrived in Fairfield. The anxiety was immense, and as her contractions intensified, Emily closed her eyes, whispering words of encouragement to herself and to her babies. The pain was intense, but each wave carried the promise of a new beginning. Every passing minute brought her closer to one of the most significant moments of her life. The medical team was prepared for the arrival of all 3, and after hours of labor, she finally heard the sound that changed her life, her baby's cries. Luke was born first, followed by Liam and finally Lily. As she heard each of their cries, Emily felt tears streaming down her face. It was a feeling of absolute happiness mixed with immense relief. When the doctors placed the babies in her arms, Emily was speechless. Luke, Liam, and Lily were all perfect, each with their tiny hands and bright eyes, which, though small, carried an intensity that immediately reminded her of William. It was impossible not to notice the resemblance. The babies had those same deep, intense eyes, almost as if a part of William was there, present in them. Luke's nose and lips were identical to his father's. Liam had the same serious expression, and Lily had a sweetness in her eyes that recalled the youth of her ex-husband. This realization made Emily's heart beat faster and brought a pang of pain that she quickly pushed aside. From the very first moment, Emily devoted herself entirely to them. The triplets, though small and fragile, carried an incredible strength that fueled Emily's heart every day. She watched them sleep, feeling a peace she had never known before. The nights were long and exhausting. Caring for 3 babies alone required almost superhuman energy. She often barely slept, dividing her time between nursing, changing diapers, and comforting all 3. Despite the exhaustion, Emily refused to give in to weakness. To her, each sacrifice was an investment in the love she felt for her children. As the months went by, Emily adapted her life to the intense rhythm of caring for triplets. Clara remained present, providing constant help, but Emily avoided burdening her friend too much. She knew this was her responsibility, a commitment she had taken on alone and one that gave her life purpose. Her days were filled with small challenges, from keeping up with bills to ensuring her children lacked for nothing. Financial difficulties were a constant challenge, and she often found herself counting every penny to make sure her children had the essentials. Emily cut out luxuries, lived simply, and juggled every expense. Her past, as the wife of a millionaire, seemed like a distant, almost unreal life that no longer mattered in her current reality. Luke, the oldest, was the leader among the siblings. Even at such a young age, he showed a vibrant energy that captivated Emily. Always active and curious, Luke explored every corner of the house, and Emily saw in him a determined and brave spirit. Liam, on the other hand, had a calmness that contrasted with his brother's energy. Observant and more introspective, he liked to stay by his mother's side, as if seeking silent comfort in Emily. Lily, the only girl, possessed an almost magical sweetness. She could calm her brothers with just her presence, and Emily often found her smiling alone, as if she already understood life's mysteries. Despite the joy the triplets brought, Emily avoided any contact with New York society. She knew that any connection to that world could risk William discovering the existence of the children, which was her greatest fear. She had decided that the triplets didn't need William. They were her reason for living, and she wouldn't let anything threaten the peace she fought so hard to achieve. Deep down, she still felt the weight of the memories and pain caused by his abandonment, but her strength came from the promise of a safe and happy future for Luke, Liam, and Lily. Time passed, and each achievement of the babies felt like a victory. Emily celebrated each smile, each step, each word. When she first heard Luke say "Mama," she cried with emotion. Being a mother to those three was to her both a privilege and an honor. The difficult days and sleepless nights were nothing compared to the unconditional love she felt. Emily knew that the triplets were her reason for living, and while her past with William still left scars, she strove to keep those memories buried. He had made his choice, and she wouldn't allow him to destroy what she was building with her children. The following months were a period of adaptation, and Emily grew stronger with each passing day. She discovered abilities she never knew she had, and each challenge was an opportunity to prove to herself that she could be everything her children needed. Gradually, the triplets grew, and with each new smile, each laugh, each glance, Emily knew she was creating a true family, one built on love and dedication. In the heart of Fairfield, where simplicity and love reigned, Emily and her children had found their home. William Lancaster found himself once again at the center of a luxurious party, surrounded by a crowd of smiling faces, all eager to flatter him. From a distance, he looked like the perfect man, successful, charming, accompanied by Tiffany, his young and beautiful wife, who proudly displayed her place beside him. But behind every smile, beneath every toast, there was something no one could see. Tiffany, who had once been the promise of an exciting life, was now a source of restlessness and discomfort. In the beginning, their relationship had been defined by intense physical attraction and the pleasure of being together, always seeking new experiences. Tiffany loved to show off beside William, and he, captivated by her youthful energy, enjoyed this new phase of his life. However, over time, William began to notice the small signs of dissatisfaction that appeared in Tiffany. She always seemed to be searching for something more, for a greater shine. Wherever they went, she wanted to be seen, admired, and, above all, envied. Tiffany dreamed of grandeur that never seemed fully satisfied. She demanded more and more from William. A luxurious apartment in Manhattan? Not enough. She wanted a larger penthouse overlooking Central Park. The jewelry William gifted her, though valuable, soon lost their charm. With every event, she wanted a more extravagant dress, a set of diamonds that would outshine any other sparkle in the room. And when William questioned the need for such ostentation, Tiffany would look at him with a subtle expression of disdain, as if he had lost touch with what mattered to her. Month by month, Tiffany's demands increased, and William's patience wore thin. The arguments started small, often hidden behind laughter and parties, but slowly the disagreements became frequent and visible. Tiffany was no longer the fun, carefree companion he had chosen. She had become an unsatisfied woman who never seemed happy. One night at a party at the city's most exclusive club, she confronted him in front of friends and acquaintances. He had refused to buy her a new luxury car, and Tiffany, drunk and resentful, made sure to criticize him publicly. "William, what's this? Are you getting cheap now, afraid to spend what you have?" Her sarcastic words hit him hard. He tried to silence her, whispering for her to calm down, but Tiffany continued, insensitive to the disgust on his face. For her, this type of confrontation was merely a game of power. In the following days, the clashes only intensified. Tiffany began challenging him constantly, making cutting remarks about William's age, and hinting that he could no longer keep up with the life she desired. These remarks quietly eroded William's confidence. Where he once saw a lively woman, he now saw someone who humiliated him, exposing his weaknesses and treating him as a means to achieve status. For the first time, William began to question what he was really looking for in this relationship. Tiffany's disdainful glances and insatiable need for luxuries were a constant reminder that he might be paying too high a price. One morning, William woke up and found Tiffany sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone with a mysterious smile. She was exchanging messages with a tone of intimacy that disturbed him, and when he questioned her, she simply shrugged. "They're just friends, William. You're overreacting," she said, without even looking him in the eye. But something in her expression, in the way she lightly laughed at the messages, sparked a bitter suspicion in William. In the following days, William started noticing signs of betrayal. Tiffany would leave for events without him, spend entire nights out, and when she returned, dodged his questions with vague and evasive answers. Each of her outings became torment for William, who tried to keep his composure, but felt as though the ground was collapsing beneath him. In a moment of anguish, he confronted her openly, demanding to know the reason for her nocturnal escapades and the source of so many secrets. "William," she replied with cold disdain, "you're getting old and paranoid. You should relax and enjoy your life instead of trying to control me." Her words were like knives, cutting and cruel, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his choice. Tiffany had no love for him, only contempt disguised as a seductive smile. The glow of her youth had turned to venom, and William felt as though he was being swallowed by this bitter reality. In those lonely nights, William found himself thinking about Emily. He had left her for someone he thought was an improved version of what he desired. But now the memory of Emily took on new, vivid colors, and he wondered if it had all been worth it. William began to remember how Emily had supported him without asking for anything in return, her patience, her unconditional love. In Tiffany, he found none of this. The emptiness she left beside him was deep and real, and for the first time, William had to admit to himself that he might have traded real love for a fleeting illusion. Tiffany's betrayals didn't stop. Slowly, William discovered that she was involved with other men, in a constant search for excitement and what he couldn't give her. Their marriage had turned into a cycle of accusations, resentment, and humiliation. William was trapped in a web of disappointment and bitterness, unable to keep up the facade. Deep down, he knew that Tiffany had never been what he truly needed, but now he was paying the price for his choice. One night, after yet another heated argument, Tiffany left the house and didn't return until dawn. William, alone in the silence of his luxurious apartment, felt the weight of his loneliness like never before. Surrounded by all the symbols of his wealth and status, William realized that he was empty. Nothing he owned, no amount of fortune, could fill the regret and loss growing in his chest. The next morning, Tiffany returned without a trace of remorse, as if nothing had happened. William looked at her in silence, but this time something had changed in his gaze. He knew he couldn't keep up with this charade, that this marriage had become a reflection of everything he had abandoned and lost. Decisive, William looked her in the eye and said in a firm, grave tone, "That's enough, Tiffany. I've tolerated too much. This marriage is over." Tiffany, listening with a defiant expression, laughed. To her, it was obvious that William would never dare to leave her, but seeing the resolute expression on his face, she finally realized that he was serious. William could taste the bitter flavor of defeat and regret, but something ignited within him. Perhaps the life he sought could still have meaning, even if it wasn't with Tiffany. For the first time, he considered that it might be time to look back, to reevaluate the choices that had brought him to this point. And deep down, he thought of Emily. Did he still have any chance of finding his way back to true happiness? The years passed like a thick fog, and William Lancaster, now a more mature and solitary man, found himself at a business conference in Connecticut. He was there to represent his company in a meeting with investors and entrepreneurs from across the country, but his spirit didn't share the enthusiasm of the past. The sparkle in his eyes had faded over the years, replaced by a silent bitterness. Since the end of his tumultuous marriage with Tiffany, William had immersed himself in his career, trying to fill the void growing in his heart. However, despite his professional success, loneliness remained his constant companion. That afternoon, after an exhausting lecture, William decided to stretch his legs and breathe in the fresh air from the conference center's garden. He walked, distracted, observing the surroundings without really focusing on anything. Then, as he neared a small park adjacent to the center, his attention was caught by an unexpected sight. A woman, accompanied by 3 children, playing on the grass. Something in the children's laughter and the woman's graceful posture drew his attention. There was something about the group that evoked a strange, almost familiar sensation. William frowned, trying to shake off the feeling. But as he got closer, the woman's face became increasingly familiar, until, in a sudden shock of recognition, he realized it was Emily. Emily, his Emily, the woman he had left years ago who it seemed had moved on. Yet what shocked him even more were the children playing by her side. All 3 had wavy brown hair and those same intense eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. They ran across the grass with an infectious energy, while Emily watched with a gentle smile, radiating a love he hadn't seen since he'd left her. William's heart skipped a beat, and he found himself unable to move. Every detail of the children's faces, every laugh, and every gesture felt like pieces of his own reflection from childhood. A wave of confusion and disbelief grew within him. The children looked identical to him as a young boy. The shape of their eyes, the smile, even the way they walked, everything seemed to mirror his own past. What could this mean? William watched, perplexed, unable to believe his eyes. He couldn't look away from the scene, as if each passing second brought another piece of an impossible puzzle. Emily, unaware of William's intense gaze, was absorbed in the children's play. She called the oldest, Luke, who ran to her with a mischievous smile. The boy had a commanding presence, a confidence and leadership that reminded William of himself. Next came Liam and Lily, and the three formed a circle around their mother, whom she embraced lovingly. The scene was simple, but charged with emotions and meanings William couldn't yet understand. Finally, when Emily lifted her gaze, her eyes met William's. She stopped, and a barely perceptible tremor passed over her face. Time seemed to freeze between them. Emily felt the impact of the encounter like a lightning bolt, and the past she had buried so deeply surged to the surface. At first, the surprise prevented her from reacting. She struggled to control the flood of conflicting emotions, pain, anger, and a pang of something she didn't want to acknowledge. William, on the other hand, struggled to process what was happening. "Emily," he murmured, his voice barely audible. He approached her slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement would dissolve the vision before him. These children, He stopped, unable to complete the question, but reality seemed to shout the answer at him. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the strength she needed to face the moment. She stood tall, looking at William with resolve, while the triplets watched her curiously, not understanding the tension in the air. "Yes, William," she responded, her calm voice concealing a whirlwind of emotions. "They are my children." The response was simple, but held a truth that William couldn't fully grasp. "But they look," William stammered, still in shock. He looked at the triplets' faces, a mixture of astonishment and something close to desperation in his gaze. The resemblances were undeniable. Each expression, each smile, everything reflected his image, his heritage. But how was it possible he hadn't known? Why had Emily never told him? Emily knew it was time to say what she had longed to express. "William, you made your choice years ago. When you left me, when you went on to live a different life, you gave up any right to be here. I decided to move forward, and they are my family. I raised each of them alone, without your help, and I won't allow you to show up now, as if the past never happened." Her words hit him hard, leaving William defenseless. The pain in her voice struck him with devastating force, and he realized the depth of his own neglect. He had no idea how much Emily had suffered, what she had faced alone. He looked at the children again, and the thought of everything he had missed brought an overwhelming sense of regret. "Emily, I didn't know, I never imagined. Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. The idea that he could have been a part of their lives, that he could have been by their side from the beginning, was devastating. She shook her head, a mix of sadness and determination in her eyes. "William, you didn't want this life. You wanted freedom, luxury, a new version of yourself. I knew that bringing these children into your world would only hurt us more. There was no place for us in your life, and honestly, I don't regret raising them alone." The triplets, still not fully understanding what was happening, watched in silence. Luke, the oldest, looked at the stranger before him with serious curiosity. Liam, shy, held onto Emily's hand, and Lily, with her sweet expression, simply smiled, unaware of the impact she had on William. He wanted to reach out, to approach them, to somehow connect, but he felt blocked by the years of distance and the choices he himself had made. As he struggled to process everything, William felt the weight of the decisions that had brought him here. He had never imagined that by leaving Emily, he would be leaving behind what could have been his true happiness. He had lost years of his children's lives, years that couldn't be recovered. His mind spun with thoughts of a second chance, of reconnecting with them, but seeing the determination in Emily's face, William realized that the path back might not be so simple. William hadn't been able to sleep since his encounter with Emily and the three children he now knew were his. In the silence of his luxurious Manhattan apartment, he was consumed by the weight of his choices, by the nights wasted at parties, and by the empty life he had led while a part of his own blood had grown up far from his presence. After years of emotional blindness, regret finally hit him with devastating force. But there was something he needed to hear from Emily's own lips, the reason she had chosen to keep him completely out. The next morning, William made a life-changing decision. He got in his car and drove to Fairfield, driven by an unfamiliar urgency, a contained desperation. He no longer cared about the pride that had always guided his actions. What mattered was finding the truth and, somehow, finding a way to be part of his children's lives. Emily was at home when she heard the firm knocks at the door. Opening it, she found William standing there, his expression intense, his gaze fixed on her. She knew he would come, but even so, the confrontation hit her with sharp pain. Without a word, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. William took in the simple, cozy interior of the house, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and discomfort. "Emily," he began without preamble, "I need answers. I saw the triplets. They're my children, aren't they?" Emily looked away, clasping her hands as she tried to keep her composure. She knew it was pointless to deny the truth, but speaking those words would be like reopening a wound she had worked so hard to heal. "Yes, William," she finally replied. "Luke, Liam and Lily are your children." The confirmation hit William deeply, as if each word carried the weight of the years lost. He stood in silence for a moment, struggling to process what he had just heard, feeling a whirlwind of emotions inside him. Amidst the shock, anger also surfaced. "Why didn't you tell me, Emily? How could you keep this from me? I had the right to know." She raised her head, her eyes shining with deep resentment. "Rights," Emily repeated, with a bitterness he had never heard before. "You weren't thinking about rights when you left me, William. When you turned your back on me, you weren't thinking about anything but yourself and what you wanted out of life. You abandoned our family before it even existed." William shook his head, disturbed by her words, but he knew he had no way to refute them. He felt vulnerable, disarmed by her pain. "But you could have given me a chance to be part of their lives, to know my children." Emily let out a bitter laugh, and the tears she had been holding back began to flow down her face. "A chance? William, you made your choice. You chose a life where we didn't fit. When I found out I was pregnant, I realized there was no room for us in your life. And even if I had told you, what would you have done? Thrown money at us? Flaunted your fame? We didn't need that, and I didn't want my children growing up thinking that a father's love is measured in expensive gifts or occasional appearances." Her words struck with brutal force, each sentence a dagger to his conscience. William was about to speak, but Emily continued without giving him a chance to respond. "I spent sleepless nights, William. Our children too. I heard every cry, healed every fever, faced every hardship alone, while you were busy flaunting a life of excess and lies. I decided they didn't need that, and you were never necessary in our lives." He felt crushed by the weight of her accusations, his chest tight with a sense of guilt he didn't know how to process. Each of Emily's words revealed what he had lost and what he could never get back. Deep down, he knew she was right. He had abandoned Emily to live an empty life, and now he was a stranger in the lives of his own children. "Emily," he said, his voice faltering, "I can't change the past, but I can try to be different now. I want to be part of their lives. I want to be a father. I want, at the very least, to try." She took a deep breath, composed herself and looked at him with a mix of sadness and disbelief. "I don't know if that's possible, William. I raised our children alone, and they don't know you. They're strong, independent, and they don't need a father who might disappear at any moment." William felt his chest tighten. "I know I messed up, Emily, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but please, let me at least try." Emily's eyes sparkled with restrained emotion. Part of her wanted to believe that perhaps after all these years, he had changed, that he could be the father the triplets had never known. But the fear of opening herself up to more disappointments was real and deep. In the days that followed, driven by a sincere desire to get to know his children, William began visiting the park where Emily took them. Their encounters were brief, sometimes limited to a simple wave from afar. Gradually, he introduced himself to the children without revealing his identity. Luke, Liam and Lily were cautious at first, but curiosity soon got the better of them, and they began talking with him. Luke, the oldest, was the most guarded, always observing William with a seriousness that surprised him. Liam, however, enjoyed listening to William's stories about his life and adventures around the world. And Lily, sweet and kind, was the first to show affection, offering him a genuine smile that melted William's heart. Their meetings were slow and almost ceremonial, with William gradually gaining the children's trust. But Emily still held a barrier in her heart, watching from afar, suspicious. William knew that regaining her respect and trust would be his greatest challenge. perhaps even impossible. Every time he saw Emily pulling away when he approached, he was reminded of how deeply he had hurt her, of the life she had had to build on her own while he got lost in his illusions. As his relationship with the children began to blossom, William discovered a paternal love he hadn't known he was capable of. He brought small gifts for the triplets, modest presents that they eagerly accepted. And although the connection was slow, he was grateful for each smile, each look of companionship. Watching the triplets grow with their distinct personalities, and knowing they carried a part of him, was a feeling he had never experienced. But Emily remained a fortress. Whenever he tried to talk about the past or suggested any kind of reconciliation, she would shut down, reminding him of the abandonment. "I can't just forget, William. You weren't there when I needed you, and I don't want you playing with our children's lives now." William knew that winning Emily's trust would be the greatest obstacle to overcome. Every time she pushed him away, he felt the weight of his past, but he was determined to keep trying. He realized that the path wasn't just about winning Emily back, but also about creating a real space in the children's lives, showing them that despite the lost years, he was committed to being part of their lives. Emily was now facing one of the most devastating dilemmas of her life. After years of fighting and dedicating herself wholeheartedly to the triplets, building a wall around her heart and her children's lives seemed like the only way to protect them. William, the man who had broken her heart and left her alone to raise 3 lives, was now insisting on being part of the world she and the triplets had built with so much effort and pain. Each time he approached and won a new smile from the children, Emily felt an unsettling mix of fear, anger, and hope. Luke, Liam, and Lily, for their part, were curious and enchanted by their father's presence. They didn't yet understand the painful past between their parents, and being so young, they saw William as a fun novelty, an interesting and mysterious figure who had arrived to bring color and adventure to their lives. Luke, always observant, would ask subtle questions about his father, trying to understand who he really was. Liam, gentle and dreamy, showed immediate affection, seeing in William something he had quietly longed for, a male figure to admire. And Lily, with her warm smile and gentle nature, approached William with a tenderness that sometimes broke Emily's heart. They longed for that bond, for that love that to them was a new discovery. Emily, however, remained torn. She knew William's presence could bring genuine happiness to the triplets, a connection she could never provide alone. There were moments when she would see them together, and for an instant feel her resistance dissolving, leaving room for the possibility of a new story, of a different ending for their lives. But soon the fear would seep back into her thoughts, reminding her of the arrogant William, the one who had left her without a second glance. She questioned whether he had truly changed or was merely seeking superficial redemption, a way to ease his guilt. In the stillness of the nights, when the triplets were asleep and the house was silent, Emily confronted the doubts that seemed to grow with each passing day. She wondered if she was depriving her children of essential love, of a family bond that could make their lives happier and more complete. At the same time, she feared that opening up to William might be like handing her heart to someone who wouldn't hesitate to break it again. It was a game of risk and loss, and any decision she made would have deep consequences. William, on the other hand, was determined to prove his worth. He no longer expected immediate forgiveness from Emily, but he dedicated himself to being present in a steady and sincere way. Gradually, William began attending the triplets' school activities, going to Luke and Liam's soccer games, and to the music events where Lily performed. He would sit in the stands, cheer and support them alongside the other parents, as if he had been part of that routine from the beginning. One rainy afternoon, there was a game where Luke, the most determined of the triplets, failed to score the goal he had so badly wanted. The boy, discouraged, left the field with his head down. It was William who waited for him at the edge of the field, offering a reassuring smile and words of encouragement that surprised even himself. "You know, Luke, it's normal to lose sometimes. It only makes you stronger for the next time," William said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Luke looked at him with teary eyes, surprised and grateful, and without hesitation hugged his father tightly. Emily, watching from a distance, felt her heart clench at the sight. The wall she had built seemed about to collapse. Liam, always more sensitive and introspective, also began to form a special bond with William. The boy loved listening to stories, and William would tell him tales of his adventures around the world. Liam listened, captivated, and found himself wanting to learn more about the father he barely knew. His bright eyes would give him away. He yearned for William's affection in a way he didn't know how to express. Lily, meanwhile, had a more subtle, delicate connection with her father. One morning, as he took them to the park, she held his hand gently and led him to the top of a hill where she and Emily would often go. There she pointed to the view of the small town and said in a low voice, almost like a secret, "This is where we see the stars." William, touched by her sweetness, stood silent, fully aware of the beauty of the moment. Over the months, the triplets began to warm up to William, and he, in turn, dove into a paternal love he hadn't known was within him. His transformation was genuine, and he dedicated himself wholeheartedly to being the father he should have been from the start. The arrogance that once defined him had faded. He no longer sought the luxuries and fleeting glories of his old life. Instead, he found his happiness in the children's small achievements, in the smiles and hugs they freely gave him each day. Emily, observing this change, began to feel her resistance diminish, as if the wall around her heart was finally giving way. She saw that William wasn't there to earn redemption. He was there because he genuinely loved the triplets and wanted to build a different life. But at the same time, fear still lingered in her heart. There were nights when she cried silently, wishing everything could be easier, that the scars from her past with William weren't so deep. She found herself facing a decision that consumed her entirely. By opening her heart to William, she would allow the paternal love to fully blossom in the triplets' lives, but she would also risk him breaking her hopes once more. Emily still felt the weight of her wounds, the echo of years of pain and abandonment, and feared that any mistake could destabilize the life of her children, whom she had fought so hard to protect. One night, William came to her, his expression serious but gentle. He looked into her eyes, with a sincerity he had never shown before. "Emily," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I know I messed up and I have no right to ask for anything, but I love our children and I know I love you too. I don't expect you to forgive everything, but I'm here to do whatever it takes to prove I've changed. I want to build something real, the way it should have been from the start." William's words pierced through Emily's final defenses. She felt the weight of her tears, her heart torn between reason and hope. There was something in his demeanor, in the way he spoke, that revealed a truly changed man, but her fear was as deep as her love. In the silence of that night, she knew her decision would forever change the course of their lives. Winter had arrived in Fairfield, bringing a biting cold that seemed to reflect the hesitations and uncertainties still surrounding Emily. It had been months since William had returned to the triplets' lives, and his effort to rebuild that relationship had been nothing short of admirable. Luke, Liam, and Lily no longer saw him as a stranger. He had become a constant and reliable presence in their lives, someone with whom they shared stories, secrets, and dreams. And although Emily had fought to keep her defenses up, she knew that each gesture of love and dedication from William was slowly opening a crack in her heart. Days turned into weeks, and with each encounter, Emily saw sincerity in William's eyes. The arrogant, insensitive man from the past was now a distant shadow, replaced by someone willing to give up his pride to be by her side and their children's. With every look, every smile, every silence between them, Emily felt a tension building up. It was as if they were both treading on unknown ground, testing every step, every word, hoping the path was safe, but fearing that a single decision could tear everything down again. One day, on a cold and cloudy afternoon, Emily invited William for dinner at her home, a gesture she had never made since he had come back into her life. The invitation felt like a silent reconciliation, an opportunity to be together in an intimate setting, free from the painful memories that always haunted them. William arrived a bit early, nervous like he had never been before. Stepping through the door, he felt the warmth and coziness of that home, a home he knew he had never deserved, but one he now wanted more than anything. The dinner was simple, but filled with tender moments. Luke and Liam animatedly talked about their upcoming soccer game, and Lily, with her sweet nature, wanted to know all about William's adventures around the world. Emily, for her part, observed quietly, absorbing every detail, every smile, every look her children gave their father. It touched her deeply as she saw, finally, the family she had once dreamed of building. After dinner, when the children were asleep, William and Emily stayed in the living room in a silence filled with unspoken feelings. William looked at her, trying to find the right words, but instead, he reached out and took her hands. Emily felt the warmth of his hands, and in that moment, it was as if all the years of pain and resentment were slowly dissolving. She couldn't hold back her tears. "I never knew how much all of this would cost me, Emily," he said in a low voice, his voice thick with emotion. The years I spent away, the pain I caused you and our children, I regret it every day. I know I can't undo what I did, but I can promise you that I'll never leave you again." Emily looked at him, her tears reflecting the mix of pain and hope she had carried for so long. "William," she replied, her voice hesitant but sincere, "for years I held on to this resentment, this pain. I thought I'd never be free from the past. But in these last months I've seen you change. I've seen the love you have for our children. I don't know if I can forget everything, but I want to try. I want to believe it's possible to start again." Those were the words William had longed to hear, but he knew that full forgiveness would take time. He didn't ask for haste or expect anything beyond the chance to show that he had truly changed. In the days that followed, they began to build a new life together, a new way of being a family, taking cautious, thoughtful steps. Emily still had her doubts, but over time, the shared moments, the children's laughter, and William's steady presence dispelled the remnants of distrust. Soon, William was immersed in the small routines he had never imagined would be so precious. He would take the triplets to school, help them with homework, be present at every achievement, every small setback of daily life. His presence became a pillar of security and love for the children, and Emily finally allowed herself to feel the peace of a complete home. A significant moment occurred during Lily's school recital. She had been preparing for weeks to perform on the guitar in front of her classmates, and that day, the whole family was in the audience to support her. William watched, emotional, as Lily took the stage and began to play, and looking to his side, he saw Emily smiling with a sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen since they first met. It was a smile of pride, of true love. He squeezed her hand, a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning, and in that moment, they knew they were truly together, that they had finally found their way back to each other. With the passing months, love blossomed between them once more, but now it was a more mature, resilient love. There were no more illusions or empty promises. They both had their scars, and though they knew the past could never be erased, they were ready to build a future founded on respect, understanding, and commitment. Their nights were now filled with sincere conversations, sharing the pains, the joys, and the lessons time had brought them. William had shed his arrogance and become a humble man, aware of the value of the small things and the gestures that make a family strong. Emily, for her part, allowed herself to trust, to make space for love, giving both him and herself the chance to begin anew. Their hearts, once marked by suffering and disappointment, now beat in harmony, and together they found the peace they had long sought. Time passed, and that family, once seemingly impossible, now flourished in unity. Emily and William, side by side, watched the triplets grow, celebrating every achievement and facing every challenge together. And in the simplest moments, when they would sit around the dinner table or go for a walk in the park, they felt the fullness of happiness that once seemed like a distant dream. Emily knew that she had finally found true happiness. She looked at William and their children and felt her heart at peace, grateful for having had the courage to move forward, to give both him and herself a second chance. William, on the other hand, cherished every moment, aware that the love and family he now had were the greatest treasures of his life. And you, would you forgive William? After all he did, all the hurt and years of absence, do you think he deserves a second chance? Put yourself in Emily's shoes for a moment. If it were you, would you open up to let this love grow again, knowing the risks and the pain it had already caused? Or would you choose to protect yourself and your children, standing firm in the scars of the past? Would you follow your heart or your head? And don't miss the next video that's popping up on the screen. I'm sure you'll love it.